Hi, my name is Luna, and I know what you're thinking. Nice lighting. Perfect dress. Flawless hair, another spoiled rich girl with too much time and a personal trainer. But before you roll your eyes or click away, let me tell you something. I was raised in a world where appearances were everything and reality was optional. My family, the Whitmores, aren't just well off, we're legacy, wealthy, old money, old power, old rules. If you've ever walked past the towering glass headquarters of Whitmore Holdings in Lower Manhattan, that's us. My father, Gregory Whitmore, built an empire on leveraged buyouts and international finance. He doesn't just know the market, he moves it. My mother, Eleanor Whitmore, is just as powerful in her own realm. She's not a CEO, but she's the queen of curated perfection. From high society galas in the Hamptons to exclusive donor dinners in D.C. She controls narratives like a PR sorceress. She can turn a scandal into sympathy in one press cycle. She can destroy a reputation with a whisper over cocktails at the Metropolitan Club. I was their oldest daughter. The heir. The showpiece. The talking proof that Whitmore values bred success. And I played the part to perfection. Private schools. Equestrian trophies. Summers in St. Moritz. A wardrobe curated by stylists my classmates only saw in Vogue. I graduated Stanford top of my class with a dual degree in behavioral economics and luxury brand strategy. Just as planned. But there was a problem. No one ever asked me what I wanted. See? Everyone assumed I'd slide right into a senior position at Whitmore Holdings. Become the face of the next generation. But I had a different dream, one that didn't come with skyscrapers or spreadsheets. I wanted to build something of my own, a boutique design studio in Brooklyn focused on sustainable fashion and emerging creators. You'd think that with my education, my network, and my perfect image, they'd trust me. But in the Whitmore world, autonomy is a threat. And fashion, that was beneath us. Design is cute, my mother said during one of our rare bonding lunches. But real influence is measured in board seats and market share. Leave trends to influencers. But I didn't listen. I secured a lease on a light-filled studio in Dumbo with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. I partnered with a brilliant creative director named Miranda Keller. I sunk a portion of my trust into inventory, launch events, and press outreach. And for 3 glorious months, it worked. We were featured in Elle. We had fashion editors showing up unannounced, and stylists from Elle, A-minus, calling in pieces for red carpets. I felt like I had finally stepped into my life. Until the calls started. First, our vendors weren't getting paid. Then our accountant flagged discrepancies in our accounts. Finally, Miranda disappeared, vanished like smoke with every last dollar and forged document left behind, like a calling card. She wasn't who she claimed to be. In fact, she'd done this before twice, under different names. And just like that, my boutique collapsed. The press didn't hold back. Whitmore heiress duped in designer scam. The story trended for 3 days. My face, frozen mid-laugh at our launch party, plastered across every gossip site. My name became a punchline in the very circles I'd once ruled. My parents didn't come to my defense. No. They weaponized my failure. I remember that dinner like it was yesterday, my father glaring at me across a mahogany table longer than most city apartments. "You embarrass this family," he said, through clenched teeth. "Do you even understand due diligence?" My mother sipped her wine. "Your father trusted you. That reflects on our judgment." Within 48 hours, they revoked my apartment, which I later found out was technically owned by one of my father's LLCs. My credit cards were shut off. My car was replaced with a 12-year-old Prius and a lecture on humility, and I was moved into the pool house behind our Greenwich estate. I had become a project. A cautionary tale. Every lunch, every family function, came with subtle jabs and pitiful glances. My cousins were congratulated on their promotions while I was praised for staying grounded. What hurt most wasn't the loss of money or status. It was the quiet erasure of my identity. The girl who once walked into rooms like she owned them was now expected to apologize for existing. But this isn't where my story ends. It's just where the mask starts to crack. Because what my family didn't know, what nobody saw coming, is that this wasn't going to be the end of me. It was only the beginning. You'd think that after the public embarrassment, after the headlines, after being reduced from rising entrepreneur to tabloid fodder, my parents would at least give me time to recover. They didn't. 2 weeks after the scandal, while I was still trying to figure out how to make coffee without a personal chef, I was summoned to the main house. The message came through our longtime housekeeper, Margot Suttle. Of course. Because God forbid Eleanor Whitmore ever issue a direct command. They'd like to see you in the library. Now, the library. Always the library. It was where we took family Christmas photos. Where we hosted senators and CEOs. Where my father read The Economist like it was scripture. When I stepped in, both of them were seated as if this was a formal negotiation. My mother wore her signature icy blue silk blouse, the one that matched her diamond cufflinks. My father sat in his favorite leather wingback chair, already scowling. And then I saw him. A man I didn't recognize, standing stiffly by the fireplace in a gray suit that looked like it belonged on a clearance rack. Brown hair. Average height. Her hands clasped in front of him like a nervous intern. He didn't smile. Sit. Luna, my father said, gesturing to the settee like I was being called into a deposition. Your mother and I have made a decision. He began. Oh no. I glanced at the stranger. He didn't meet my eyes. We've arranged a marriage, my mother said flatly, as if she were announcing new curtains. To help recalibrate your future. I laughed. I actually laughed. Like a full body, are you kidding me laugh that echoed across the walnut-paneled room. Wait. This is a joke. All right, you're seriously going to arrange my marriage like it's 1820? He's the son of Leonard Carter. My father continued, ignoring my disbelief. You remember Leonard? He's been our family attorney for decades. I stared at the man. He finally stepped forward and extended a hand. Owen Carter, he said. Vice neutral. It's nice to meet you. I'm not shaking your hand, I replied. Because this isn't real. Because you're not seriously going along with this. I understand your reaction, he said. Unfazed. But this was a mutual agreement. Not mutual with me, I snapped. My mother sighed. Luna, you've become unstable, directionless. The marriage would provide structure. He's respectable. Clean record. Financially conservative. Not flashy. Not flashy, I repeated. Is that a requirement now, beige? Boring. And obedient. My father leaned forward. You'll receive an apartment in Midtown and an entry-level position in the PR division of Whitmore Holdings. That's more than fair. And if I say no, then you'll leave with what you came in with, he said coldly. Which, after that boutique disaster, isn't much. My mother added, think of your father's health. Luna, this stress isn't good for his heart. Emotional blackmail. Classic. I stormed out of the room and went straight to the only person who might offer me a scrap of honesty, my sister. Ivy. Ivy was 5 years younger than me. The golden child now that I had fallen. She still lived in the main house. Still dressed in coordinated silk sets. Still played her part. She looked up from her MacBook as I barged in. You know, I said, don't pretend you don't. She closed the laptop. They've been planning it for weeks. Since the story broke. Why? It's not about punishment anymore. She said quietly. It's about the narrative. If you marry some forgettable financial guy and take a humble job, they get to say it's redemption. That you've matured. That they guided you back to your senses. I sat on the edge of her bed. Stunned. You sound like Mom. I've been listening for 20 years. Ivy replied. I know the script. 3 days later. I agreed to have dinner with Owen Carter. We met at an underwhelming Italian place in Midtown. He wore the same gray suit. Drove a Honda Civic. Ate his risotto, like someone who'd memorized the correct fork to use but didn't actually care. After dinner, he invited me up to see his apartment. A third-floor walk-up in a gentrifying part of the city and water.r. Sparse furniture. One bookshelf. A modest kitchen. This is where I live. He said. No yacht, no skyline view, I asked. Arms crossed. I'm not trying to impress you. He said calmly. I agreed to this marriage for practical reasons. I assumed you did too. I stared at him. You're really okay with marrying someone you don't even know? I'm not marrying a stranger. He replied, I'm marrying someone I've been instructed is in need of a controlled narrative. I should have slapped him. I didn't because, deep down, a part of me knew he wasn't wrong. Later that week, I did something desperate. I met up with my ex, Julian Reeves. We dated in grad school at Stanford. He'd recently moved back to New York to work for an investment firm. We met at a rooftop bar in Tribeca. He was as polished as ever Armani suit. Cartier watch. Smirk like a stock photo. This marriage thing? He said after I explained everything. It's insane. But what if there's a better option? I looked at him. Hope flickering. We were good together once. He said. And, let's be honest, having Whitmore on my side wouldn't hurt. And just like that, the flicker died. I walked out into the night and let the city swallow me whole. That was the moment I knew. If I was ever going to reclaim my life, it wouldn't be by waiting for someone to rescue me. Not my family. Not an ex. And definitely not a man who wore beige on purpose. It had to start with me. The morning of the wedding felt like it belonged to someone else's life. There was sunshine pouring through the French windows of the Greenwich estate. Birds chirping just outside. And the faint hum of string quartet rehearsal rising from the garden. It should have been the kind of morning I once dreamed about, elegant, serene, curated to perfection. But instead of excitement, I felt numb. My dress hung on the padded hanger like a sentence. It wasn't the fairy tale couture gown I once imagined. No tulle. No sparkle. No drama. It was a slim ivory sheath my mother had selected herself tasteful. She'd said, which in Eleanor Whitmore terms meant quiet enough not to offend the narrative, you look appropriate. She assessed that morning, clasping a string of pearls around my neck. Remember to smile for the cameras. We've scaled things down to keep the focus on family values. Family values. Right. The guest list had been slashed from 300 to 50, no society reporters, no red carpet, no trending hashtags. My old friend circle had vanished without a trace. Even my college roommate. Savannah. Sent regrets but somehow found time to post beachside selfies from the Maldives. My mother called it a humbling ceremony. I called it an execution with hors d'oeuvres. My father walked me down the aisle. Stiff and silent. His arm locked around mine like a shackle. The guests were a curated list of family associates, people more interested in maintaining power alliances than witnessing a union. The whispers started before I even reached the altar. She looks thinner. Someone murmured. I heard she lost everything. Another said, too loud to be accidental. Then there was Owen. Waiting in his navy suit, not designer, but well-tailored. Calm. Unbothered. He didn't look nervous. He looked like someone attending a quarterly board meeting. When I reached him, he leaned over and whispered, just breathe. It was the first time he said something that didn't feel rehearsed. The vows were traditional. The kiss brief. The applause polite. The reception, held under a white tent behind the estate, featured practical centerpieces and respectable toasts. Everything was sanitized. Like a scandal management press release with cake, our wedding gift said it all stainless steel appliances. Modest home decor. And not a single designer item in sight. Even the apartment my parents gifted us came with caveats, located in a gentrifying corner of Brooklyn. Furnished with catalog pieces my mother personally picked for their neutral tones. I thought this place was for newlyweds. I muttered, surveying the twin beds in our shared room. When you're ready, she had said delicately. There's always the option to combine. Home sweet home. Owen carried the last suitcase in, placed it neatly by the beige couch, and said with zero irony, it's not so bad. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went to the kitchen to figure out how to use a microwave. The last time I'd made toast, I was 12. The days that followed blurred together. I started working in Whitmore Holdings' PR department, not as a strategist, but as a glorified assistant. Coffee runs. Calendar management. Filing. Jennifer, my supervisor, treated me like a high school intern. We expect everyone to follow protocol. Miss Whitmore, she said pointedly. Evan, you. Owen, on the other hand, left early every morning for his consulting job. He came home late, spent evenings locked in his office on whispered phone calls, and kept a meticulously organized desk that suggested something deeper than generic finance work. And slowly, I started to notice things. He never asked for help, never talked about his day. But there was an edge to the way he moved, like someone used to commanding a room. The rare times I heard his voice from behind the office door, it wasn't timid or forgettable. It was sharp, efficient, powerful. Who was this man? One Saturday afternoon, my sister Ivy dropped by with a bottle of wine and a hesitant smile. This place actually has potential, she said, peeking around the apartment. Kind of industrial chic. I poured 2 glasses. With crumbling grout and flickering lights. Charming. She leaned in. So, Owen, what's the deal? He's not what I expected. What did you expect? I asked. Someone desperate. Or boring. I don't know, she said carefully. He reminds me of Dad. Before all the boardrooms and arrogance. Quiet. Observant. Calculated. That night, Owen came home with takeout from a Thai place I'd been secretly craving. I asked how he knew. He shrugged. You circled it in a food mag 2 weeks ago. We ate on the floor because our dining table wobbled, and when the bookshelf we'd tried to build together collapsed spectacularly. Ed deadpanned. Clearly, we're not ready for construction permits. I laughed. Genuinely. For the first time in months. After Ivy left. We sat with our coffees and silence. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't magical. But it was something. Thanks for being decent to my sister. I said eventually. She sees you more clearly than your parents do. He replied. She sees your strength? Strength, I scoffed. I'm in a marriage I didn't choose. Living in a rental I didn't decorate. Working a job that treats me like a liability. That's not what I see. He said. Quietly? I see someone who hasn't broken. Even after being stripped of everything. There was a pause. A silence that said more than any toast at the reception ever did. And that's when I realized this man wasn't a punishment. He might just be the first person in my life who actually saw me. It was 2:03 a.m. when I woke up and noticed the bed next to mine was empty. Not that this was unusual. Owen had developed a pattern quietly slipping out in the middle of the night to take calls or work behind his always locked office door. I'd grown used to it. Like the sound of the faucet that never quite shut off, or the way our ceiling fan ticked just slightly off-beat. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was the wine I'd had with dinner or the strange energy in the apartment that night. But I slipped out of bed, padded barefoot down the hall, and pressed my ear to the door. His voice was firm. Precise, nothing like the flat, agreeable tone he used around my parents. Yes. Tell legal to prep the Singapore acquisition documents before market opens. We'll release the statement at 8 a.m. Eastern. Standard language about sustainability and expansion synergy. Singapore acquisition. I didn't even know he was working with international clients. The door creaked when I pushed it open. He didn't turn. Just finished typing. Clicked his headset off presentation. And said, "Well, that took longer than expected." The room looked nothing like the rest of the apartment. 3 massive monitors glowed on the wall. Financial dashboards. Algorithmic charts. Real-time stock data. A Bloomberg terminal blinked in the corner. A glass dry erase board filled with forecasts. On the bookshelf, economic theory. Behavioral finance. Global sustainability reports. And there was Owen. Or whoever he really was. "You're not a junior consultant." I said. "No." He replied evenly. "I'm not." I stepped inside, blinking. "What are you?" He leaned back in his chair and opened a desk drawer. Pulled out a sleek leather magazine and handed it to me. Forbes. Dated 2 years ago. Cover headline, "The Invisible Billionaire, Inside the Mind of Aurora Capital's Secretive CEO." I froze. "You're MP." I whispered. "Mason Parker." "You're him." He nodded. "Guilty." Aurora Capital. The private equity firm everyone on Wall Street whispered about. The one that outperformed Goldman, Bain, and Blackstone, without anyone ever seeing the man behind the curtain. His estimated net worth $4.2 billion. I sat down. Hard. "Why the act?" I asked. "Why pretend to be a nobody? Why marry me?" He paused before answering. "Because I wanted to see your family from the inside before finalizing certain decisions." My stomach twisted. So our marriage was just a business strategy. Originally, he admitted. Yes. I stood up. Rage and humiliation, flashing through me like fire. "You used me." "No," he said quietly. "I met you?" He reached for the keyboard and pulled up a folder. Inside were bank records, emails, internal memos, transfers from my mother's charity foundation to shell corporations connected to Miranda Keller. Contracts flagged. Background checks bypassed. It was all there. They orchestrated your failure," he said, meeting my eyes. "Your boutique didn't collapse from incompetence. It was sabotage, designed to force you back under control." I felt like I was falling, like the ground beneath me was sliding away. "My mother did this to me," he nodded. "With help? Your father's advisor William Harris coordinated the logistics. Miranda was the tool. You were the target. And you knew," I whispered. "You knew and didn't tell me I suspected before the wedding. I confirmed it 3 months ago." "Then why not tell me the moment you knew?" His voice softened. "Because you needed to find your strength again. And if I'd told you too soon, it wouldn't have been yours. It would have been borrowed from me. From anger? From revenge. You deserved better than that." I sank into the chair across from him. "So what now? That depends on what you want." "Luna," he said. No one had asked me that in months. "I want my name back," I said finally. "My truth. My power." He smiled faintly. "Then let's take it." The next morning, the twin beds were gone. We replaced them with a real one. Together? But it wasn't about romance. Not yet. It was about trust. About partnership. About looking someone in the eye and saying, "I don't fully know you, but I believe in what we can build." Over the next 2 weeks, our apartment transformed into a war room. Whiteboards covered the walls. Data reports. Timelines. Family records. Grace Langford, Aurora Capital's strategic officer, a silver-haired woman I recognized from our wedding, joined the plan. She was sharp, calm, and unflinching. "Your boutique model was strong," Grace told me, scanning my old pitch deck. "You had good instincts. Great brand alignment. With proper capital and operational controls, it would have been profitable in 18 months. I blinked. It was the first time anyone had said I wasn't a failure. Mason, no. Owen guided me through it all. Financial documents. Market positioning. Power dynamics. I started to learn not just what went wrong, but how it had been engineered to break me. We built a dossier. Emails. Transactions. Photos. Testimonies. And then, one afternoon, the invitation arrived. A cream envelope. Gold lettering. Formal script. "Gregory and Eleanor Whitmore cordially invite you to their 35th anniversary gala. The Plaza Hotel. Black tea. 7 p.m. I looked up from the card, my hands trembling slightly. "They're handing you the stage," Owen said. "What are you going to do with it?" I didn't hesitate. "Burn the script." The plaza was gleaming. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a ballroom filled with New York's most elite media barons, hedge fund titans, senators, old money heiresses draped in vintage couture, and new money wives sipping Dom Perignon like it was tap water. The Whitmore Anniversary Gala had always been one of the crown jewels of East Coast society. It was where alliances were whispered over foie gras and deals were inked in glances across marble floors. This year, it was also where I planned to rewrite the story of my life. Owen or Mason? Though I still hadn't gotten used to that walked beside me in a black tuxedo. Expression unreadable. I wore midnight blue satin. Sharp lines. No frills. Not soft. Not apologetic. No pearls. No disguise. We walked into that ballroom like two ghosts come back from the dead. All heads turned, some gasped. Some whispered. My mother spotted us from across the room. She was laughing with a senator's wife. One hand curled around a flute of champagne. Her smile barely faltered, but her eyes went cold. "Luna," she said as we approached. Her voice honeyed but sharp. What an unexpected appearance. Happy anniversary, I said, offering a glass clink and nothing more on a clink's dad. My father appeared behind her, his face harder to read. You weren't on the final RSVP list. I wasn't aware I needed permission to celebrate my parents' marriage, I said, voice even, before either of them could respond. The announcer stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the Whitmore family tribute. The ballroom lights dimmed. A video began. Golden hour photos of my parents' early years wedding pictures. Vacation snapshots. Boardroom victories. Ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The crowd clapped politely. Some even touched. Then came the final image, a family portrait. The old one. Before the scandal. Before my fall. Before I learned the truth. That's when I stood up. Excuse me, I said, walking toward the stage. At first, people chuckled, assuming it was planned. But the moment I took the mic, silence rippled through the room like a current. My name is Luna Whitmore, I said, and I have something to say not as a daughter tonight, but as a woman who had to rebuild herself from the ashes of a lie. There were no notes in my hand. No teleprompter. Just truth. 2 years ago, I launched a fashion studio dedicated to sustainability and independent designers. It was more than a business, it was my dream. That dream was stolen from me. Not by the market or misjudgment, but by sabotage. Gasps. Confused murmurs. My mother shifted in her chair. My father leaned forward. I was set up. I continued. By someone I trusted. A woman who turned out to be a professional con artist. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that she didn't act alone. A few people started filming on their phones. I let them. My own family funded the betrayal, funneled money through shell corporations, paid to orchestrate my failure. Why? To bring me back under control, to punish independence, to remind me that power in this family is not earned, it's managed, assigned, owned. My voice didn't shake. I have evidence, I said, holding up the folder. Bank statements, wire transfers, confidential memos. And tonight, I'm making them public. I turned and handed the folder to the press liaison standing by the stage. You could hear the ballroom exhale. My parents are not victims of a daughter who strayed, I said. They are architects of a system designed to keep women obedient, broken, and grateful for scraps disguised as privilege. I looked directly at my mother. For years, you told me to play small, smile, be quiet, stay beautiful and obedient. But tonight, I'm not your daughter. I'm my own damn legacy. Applause started hesitant at first. Then louder. Stronger. Owen stood at the back of the room. Not clapping. Not smiling, just watching me with a stillness that made my knees feel steadier. I stepped down from the stage and walked past my parents. My mother's face had frozen into porcelain fury. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might crack. But they said nothing. Because they couldn't annihilate, because I had just taken the very stage they owned and made it mine. Outside the ballroom, the city lights were burning bright. I stood under the awning, the chill of autumn kissing my bare shoulders, and breathed for the first time in what felt like years. Owen joined me. You set the whole damn room on fire, he said. I looked at him. No, I replied. I lit a match. The fire was already there. The morning after the gala, the world felt quiet. Not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the quiet that comes before a storm. My phone had over 300 missed notifications. Articles. Mentions. Direct messages. The top headline on 3 business sites read, "Whitmore heiress exposes family at gala in fiery speech gives proof of corporate sabotage." A small part of me wanted to crawl back into bed, bury myself beneath the sheets, and pretend none of it happened. But that part was dying and fast. Instead, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching coffee drip into a mug with trembling hands. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt cracked open, exposed, free, and terrified. Owen entered silently. No suit today, just jeans, a worn gray tee, and that calm, collected energy that always made the world feel less like it was spinning off its axis. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Not sure if I just destroyed them or myself. He handed me a printed article. Fortune magazine. The headline read, "Luna Whitmore, the heiress who burned the blueprint and built her own." "You didn't destroy anything," he said. "You uncovered it. And now, you're finally standing in your own story." That sentence stayed with me. Standing in my own story. For years, I was just a character in someone else's script. Now, the pen was in my hand. But with truth comes consequences. My mother issued a cold, performative statement that afternoon. "We are heartbroken over Luna's emotional instability and wish her the healing she clearly needs." Classic damage control: dehumanize, deflect, deny. My father remained silent. But the board of Whitmore Holdings didn't. By the end of the week, a special investigation was launched into the use of charitable funds and board-level financial misconduct. Miranda Keller was nowhere to be found, last spotted boarding a private plane to the Caymans. And me, I went back to the beginning. Back to my idea. Back to my boutique. We rebranded. Lumena, a fusion of my name and lumen? Latin for light. This time, I wasn't doing it alone. Grace Langford became my operations advisor. Owen connected me with ethical supply chain investors and creators. Designers I once mentored started coming back, offering their time, their vision, their belief in something real. But the moment that changed everything, it wasn't on a boardroom table or a glossy press shoot. It was in a dusty community center in the Bronx. 2 weeks after the gala, we were hosting a pop-up featuring sustainable fashion made by local women, including survivors of domestic abuse and immigrants rebuilding their lives. One of them, a woman named Maria, took my hand with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for showing people we're not disposable." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about reclaiming my name. It was about building a space for others to do the same. People who had been erased, shamed, undermined, forgotten. Lumina wasn't a brand. It was a movement, a mirror, a megaphone. Meanwhile, the media frenzy began to fade, as they always do. But one story lingered. Former billionaire CEO and disgraced heiress quietly launched social impact fashion platform. It made me laugh. We weren't disgraced, we were disobedient. And for the first time in my life, I loved the taste of that word. Disobedient to a system that told me my worth was in silence. Disobedient to a family who mistook control for care. Disobedient to a world that only applauds women when they're shrinking or smiling. Weeks turned into months. Owen and I, Mason, really began to shift too. We still had our twin personalities, his icy precision, my emotional storms. But we met in the middle. In the quiet, in the fight, in the rebuilding. One night, sitting on the balcony with New York glittering below us, I asked him, "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" He stared out into the night and said, "I didn't even think I'd still have a heart to feel it." That's when I kissed him. Not out of gratitude. Not out of rescue. But because he saw me at my most broken and never flinched. And I loved him for that. Maybe love grows best, not in fairy tales but in ashes. In truth. In rebellion. In the mess. That fall, Lumina was featured in Vogue. Not just for our collections but for our mission. We partnered with shelters, with recovery centers, with young artists from communities no one ever invited to the table. We built a brand that didn't ask, "Who will wear this?" We asked, "Who needs to be seen?" And they came. Not for status, but for story. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was performing. I felt like I was home. It was a quiet Wednesday morning. The kind of morning that makes you think peace might actually be permanent. I had just finished reviewing designs with the Lumina creative team. Our first eco-conscious capsule collection had exceeded every expectation. And buyers from San Francisco to Seoul were calling. I was sipping a turmeric latte when the front desk buzzed. Luna, our receptionist, said, voice slightly uncertain, "There's someone here to see you. Says she's your mother." I froze. Not because I was afraid, but because I hadn't heard that word spoken with warmth in years. Mother had become a legal term, a news headline, a wound with pearls around it. I stood slowly. My palms were suddenly cold. She was waiting in the glass foyer, still elegant, still camera ready. A white wool coat, oversized sunglasses, manicured hands holding nothing but a designer clutch. But her posture had changed. She looked smaller. "Luna," she said, removing her sunglasses. Her eyes, once like ice behind diamonds, were now tired, red-rimmed, hollow. "I didn't come here to fight," she began, "or to defend myself. I know what I did. And I know what I lost." I didn't speak. She looked around. "So this is yours?" "All of it." "Yes." I said simply. "It's beautiful." She whispered. "You always had an eye. I didn't want you to outgrow me." And you did. Silence stretched between us. Two women standing across a canyon carved by betrayal. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "Your grandmother left this for you. I found it last week. Buried in a jewelry box. Thought you might want it." She placed it on the table and turned to leave. But something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe pain, said, "Wait." "Why now?" I asked. "Why show up today?" She turned back. And for the first time in my life, I saw her as something more than a villain. "I saw your Vogue interview," she said. "You looked powerful. Free. And it broke me. Because I spent my whole life trying to be powerful and never once did I feel free." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "You did what I was too afraid to do. And that terrifies me. And I'm proud of you." Then she left. No hugs. No promises. No rewriting of history. Just truth. Just a crack in the armor. I sat at my desk and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. Faded ink. It was from my grandmother Eleanor's mother, dated the year I was born. To my granddaughter. "If you're reading this, then you've grown strong enough to face the truth. In this family, women are taught to bend. Oh, not break, but I hope you'll be the one who refuses both. Don't confuse elegance with silence. Don't trade safety for soul. And never let them make you forget who you were before they told you who to be." Love boldly. Leave loudly. Miriam, I read it twice. Then a third time. The tears didn't come fast. But they came hot. I had never known Miriam well, just fragments. Stories. But glances at old photographs. But now I realized I was her echo. And maybe I was her redemption. That afternoon, I took the letter to Owen. He read it in silence. Then looked at me and said, "She was speaking to you. Luna. Not the heiress, not the rebel. Just you." I nodded. And I think it's time I speak back. We sat together, hands intertwined. Not as a power couple or business allies, but simply two people learning how to trust again. That weekend, I returned to the house I'd grown up in. Not as a daughter coming home, but as a woman ready to close a chapter. The mansion felt smaller, colder. The staff avoided my eyes. The air was thick with unspoken apologies. I walked to my old room. The wallpaper was the same. The vanity still covered in trophies from childhood beauty pageants. I opened the closet, pulled out a box from the top shelf. Inside journals, sketches, old photographs. One photo slipped out. Me. Aganine. Standing with my grandmother in the garden. I was holding a sunflower almost as tall as me. She was laughing full, head thrown back. It was the only photo I'd ever seen where she wasn't posed. I stared at it for a long time. And I said aloud, "To the quiet house. To the echoes in the walls, I forgive you. Not because they deserved it, but because I did." I walked out of that house with only one item, the photograph. And when the door closed behind me, it didn't feel like an exit. It felt like flight. It happened on a rainy Thursday in November. The kind of day New York wears, like a gray overcoat, streets glistening with mist, taxis honking into the fog, and strangers wrapped in scarves, heads down against the wind. But inside Lumina HQ, something extraordinary was unfolding. We were preparing for our biggest launch, yet the Rise collection. Every piece designed by survivors, every thread stitched with stories. And for the first time, we weren't launching at some luxury rooftop in Manhattan. We were going to a high school gymnasium in Queens. "Are you sure about this?" Owen had asked. "The press expects something bigger." "It is big," I said, "just not in the way they're used to." So that evening, as rain danced on the windows and the scent of warm cinnamon tea filled the air, we set up folding chairs, rolled out a worn blue carpet, lit candles down the runway, and handed out handwritten programs to kids and mothers who had never been invited to a fashion show in their lives. I watched from behind the curtain as 16-year-old Tasha walked out in a reclaimed denim jacket she designed herself. She was shaking, but smiling. The crowd erupted, one after another. Models stepped forward, some in wheelchairs, some with scars, some with tears. Every outfit told a story. Every step was a revolution. And when the lights dimmed for the finale, I took the mic. "Tonight isn't about fashion," I said. "It's about the light we carry when the world tries to put us out. It's about choosing to be seen, not polished, not perfect, but real." I looked out at the crowd. Years ago, I thought power meant silence. Now I know it means giving others the microphone. So here, take it. I handed the mic to Tasha. And she spoke. She spoke about her mother who worked 3 jobs. About nights without heat. About how a sewing class in the shelter saved her from despair. She said, "I thought no one saw me. But you did. You gave me fabric. And reminded me I was never invisible." I cried. Not quietly, Because that was the moment I realized the greatest thing I'd ever designed wasn't a dress. It was space. Space for someone else to feel worthy. After the show, I walked alone to the back hallway. I needed a second to breathe. That's when I saw her, Mrs. Delaney, my old elementary art teacher. She looked exactly the same, just smaller. Like a memory made real. "Luna Whitmore," she said softly, still turning paper into stars. I smiled. "You still remember. You were 7. She said, "You told me you wanted to build a castle out of light." I never forgot that. I felt something shift in my chest, a reminder that long before I was anyone's heiress, anyone's scandal, anyone's headline, I was a girl with glitter glue and too many ideas. That night, as the rain cleared, we walked out into the street. The crowd didn't disperse in tiny signs. They lingered, talking, hugging, sharing stories. And for the first time, I understood what legacy really meant. It wasn't marble, or money, or a last name. It was the people who carry your light forward long after you're gone. The next morning, the New York Times called the show the most human fashion moment of the decade. We were invited to speak at universities, partner with social programs, build more pop-ups, mentor more young creators. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. What mattered was this: Tasha now runs our youth design lab. Maria, the woman from the Bronx shelter, is head of community outreach, and every Lumena label now comes stitched with a single sentence, embroidered by hand. "You are not invisible." One afternoon, I sat with Owen on our rooftop garden. The city below was loud, chaotic, unapologetic. "Do you ever miss the old world?" I asked him. He looked at me for a moment, then shook his head. "No. The old world never really saw us. We had to build one that did, and that's what we kept doing. One thread, one voice, one story at a time. And me, I never went back to being the Luna they wanted. I became the Luna I remembered. The one who believed light could live in fabric. That rain could feel like rebirth. That love could come in second chances. And power could sound like a whisper from someone who finally sees you. 3 months after the Queen's launch, the email arrived. It was short, polite, deceptively simple. "Luna, we'd love to have a conversation." Charles Whitmore. I stared at it for a full 10 minutes. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the audacity. The last time my father had spoken to me, it was through a lawyer. The time before that, he'd called me an emotional liability in a board meeting. Now he wanted a conversation. Owen looked over my shoulder. "He's not calling to apologize," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "He's calling because the ship's sinking." By then, Whitmore Holdings was bleeding. Investors had pulled out after the scandal. Miranda Keller's disappearance turned into a federal investigation. Multiple departments had been exposed for fraudulent operations. And while they spiraled down, Lumena rose. Our brand wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Not because we had the gloss or the funding, but because we had something Whitmore never did trust. People believed in us, in our story, in our heart. Still, a part of me hesitated. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe the faintest whisper of closure? Or maybe some wounds still wanted to be acknowledged before they could fully heal. So I agreed to meet him. We chose a neutral location, the Jefferson Hotel in D.C. He arrived early. Of course. Always a master of control. I walked into the lobby and immediately felt the weight of childhood crawl back into my spine. But I stood tall. I was not the little girl in lace tights anymore. I was Luna Whitmore, founder, builder, breaker of bloodlines. Luna, he said, standing. You look different. I am different. I replied. We sat? He cleared his throat. Let me get to the point. The company is in trouble. Deep trouble. But you already know that. I didn't speak. I want you back. He continued. Not as a pawn. As a partner. Creative director. Public face. You have credibility now. Heart. The kind of image Whitmore needs to survive. There it was. The pitch. He offered me shares. Total creative freedom. A seat on the board. A rebranding merger with Lumina. He even said we could build something new together. I looked at him and asked the question that had been burning inside me for years. Why now? He blinked. Because we're running out of time. I shook my head slowly. No. Why now? Do you suddenly see me as worthy? Is it because I became what you never thought I could without you? His jaw tensed. The mask cracked just slightly. You're angry, he said. No, I'm clear. I replied. There's a difference. He leaned forward. This is bigger than emotions. Luna. This is legacy. I smiled gently. You're right. It is. That's why I'm saying no. Silence. You built your empire by teaching people they had to earn love. That silence was safety. That control was strength. I stood. I'm building something else. He looked stunned. You'd let Whitmore collapse out of spite. No, I said. I'd let it collapse out of truth. And I'd build something better on its ashes. As I walked out of that marble lobby, heels echoing behind me, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole. Because saying no wasn't about vengeance. It was about finally choosing myself. That night, Owen and I sat on our rooftop again. I told him everything. He was quiet for a while. Then finally asked, Do you regret it? I shook my head. No. If I went back, I'd be walking into a house with no windows. Just walls. He smiled. You built a lighthouse instead. I exhaled. Maybe that's what healing is. Not pretending it didn't happen. Not fixing what broke us. But choosing what we do with the pieces. My name is Luna Whitmore. And this is not a story about fashion. It's a story about forgetting who you are, then fighting like hell to remember. It's been 5 years since that day in Queens. When 16-year-old Tasha walked down a makeshift runway and reminded the world what real power looked like. 5 years since I walked out of my father's marble tower, choosing truth over inheritance. And 5 years since I stitched the first label on a Lumina garment with a single radical phrase. You are not invisible. Today, that phrase has traveled farther than I ever imagined. It's printed on shirts in Nairobi, embroidered on scarves in Brooklyn, woven into school uniforms in Mississippi, and tattooed on the wrist of a survivor I met last month in Chicago, who told me through tears, your story gave me mine back. That's the thing they never told us growing up. They told us to shine, but only in certain colors. To speak, but only in polite, rehearsed tones. To rise, but only if it made others comfortable. No one told us that real light is disruptive. It exposes. It heals. It refuses to be dimmed. 3 weeks ago, we opened the Lumina Academy for Creative Reclamation, a space for girls and non-binary youth who've been told they're too much, too loud, too broken, or too poor to matter. We teach art, storytelling, fashion, healing, and every wall in the building is covered in mirrors not to encourage vanity, But visibility? Because seeing yourself is the first step to being free. During our opening ceremony, I gave a short speech. Nothing fancy. No press. Just a folding chair. A handheld mic. And 87 kids holding on to hope with both hands. I said your pain is not a stain. Your scars are not shameful. They're the map back to yourself. And you, yes. You are not here by accident. You are here because someone before you survived long enough to make space for your voice. I watched as heads lifted, shoulders straightened. And I thought of Miriam, my grandmother. The one who whispered through ink on paper. Leave loudly. I think she'd be proud. And Eleanor, I don't know. We speak occasionally now. Carefully. Softly. She never apologized with words. But sometimes, silence speaks a new language. One built on trying. The world I grew up in taught me to win at any cost. The world I'm building now, it teaches us to heal. To collaborate instead of compete. To lead without domination. To love without performance. People ask me if I miss the red carpets. The glamour. The attention. And I tell them the truth. Nothing feels more glamorous than walking into a shelter and handing a girl a pair of scissors, a spool of thread, and saying, go ahead. Create. Because the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, it wasn't on a runway. It was watching a 10-year-old named Amara turn a torn curtain into a cape and declare, I'm magic. They say legacy is what we leave behind. But I think it's more than that. Legacy is the warmth people feel in rooms you've never stepped into, because someone you loved carried your fire there. So, if this is the last page of this chapter, let me end it like this. To the girl crying in a bathroom because she thinks she's not enough. To the survivor sitting alone on the train wondering if anyone will ever understand. To the dreamer afraid to start because they've been told too many times they'll fail. I see you. You are not invisible. And one day, you will become the story that saves someone else's life. So don't dim. Don't disappear. The world doesn't need another polished illusion. It needs you. Raw. Brilliant. Lit from within. Just like I found myself not in the spotlight, but in the reflection of every soul I dared to see. This is not the end of my story. It's the beginning of yours. Shine on. Luna.